I've got a question here from the web. This is from William. It says, with the Area contract ending this season, are we changing our shirt manufacturers or staying with them?
We are under contract with Area to the end of this season, and as part of that contract, the terms are clear that they are our sports and manufacturing partner until the end of that contract.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. Couldn't have put it better myself.
With the announcement today of the white paper and the new football regulator, I wondered if you've had a chance to have any thoughts on that. I know it's early days.
Yeah, it's a positive. It's something that we're in favour of, although I would have to say it's unfortunate that we actually need a regulator, but because of the FA probably not fulfilling their duties, because of the power that the Premier League has, the only way that we can get reform, fair redistribution across the whole pyramid is through a regulator coming in. And, hopefully we won't even have to wait as long as potentially 2 or 3 years for the regulator and all the regulation to be in place. Hopefully this is the final thing to push the Premier League to come to an agreement with the EFL, to have fairer distribution, and also to bring in all the other elements that are included in the white paper. And really, as the EFL has said in its announcement, this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reform football in the country. Liam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, just it's very early to digest. We were actually just about to go into our board meeting as the paper dropped, so we haven't got we haven't had the opportunity to review it. I think what we know is that there are some. We would have liked them to go further in some instances, but they haven't. But I think it's a good starting point, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see where we go. One of the other elements I will say is when the Tracy Crouch report was published, you may or may not remember, but we made our commitment in order to meet what they felt were gold standards in terms of fan engagement and in terms of how we deal with things, so golden share, for example. That's something that David Lowes, one of the other senior directors at the club, is leading at the moment, working with Rob Bradley and a representational group from the supporters, a wide range of supporters, and it's still something that, regardless of what a regulator tells us or mandates us we do or don't have to do, we believe the principles are strong, and we will be doing everything within our powers at Lincoln City in order to meet the standards that we hold ourselves to, not what anybody else tells us that we should operate to.
Next in the room. Right, in that case, I've got a quick one here this is from Luke. What's the latest on the Stacey West development, and when will the work start?
Yeah, soon, hopefully. Hopefully within the time frame of March. We're just waiting on one final piece of the legal works. Got to give credit to Damien Froggatt, Director of Operations, and his team, and of course everybody at the Lindham Group. They've been incredibly supportive of us. Lincoln City Foundation have played a huge part of that. Combining Football Foundation, Towns Fund, and other sources of funding, as well as matched by the investment from the board. But yeah, really start to see this ramp up in the next calendar month, and people will see an evolution of progress from there. Next question will be, when will it be built? Damien will kill me for this, but somewhere in the region of 12 to 15 months, hopefully, depending on progress and how things go. Obviously, you'll all know supply chain and various elements at the moment aren't easy, but yeah, we're certainly hoping to have the development, if not up and running, all but up and running by this time next year.
Thanks, Liam. All right, some more questions from the room.
This is my own question this time. You spent an awful lot of money renewing the playing surface out there recently. Are you satisfied with the way the pitch is performing? Because it does seem to have deteriorated markedly as the season's gone on.
Yeah, I think just to be really clear, Brad, our head groundsman, is in the room, and I back him wholly for the work that he and his team's done. The reason why it's in the state that it's in is because we played on it in the frost against Everton. You know, without going into the boring kind of science behind it, we fundamentally just killed all the leaf off. You know, it just affected the stability of the pitch, killed a lot of the coverage. We have a programme of work. It will be not in great shape for the next few games, but there's a programme of work. So as soon as the sunlight comes back and we get the conditions we have to grow some grass again, we're quite comfortable that will come back. But yeah, that isn't anything that Brad and his team have done. What I will say is other conditions have worked against him. So I've been a bit like a grizzly bear. His lights that he has on the pitch, we've had to reduce the time that Brad uses them for. Our annual operating cost for those lights last year around £14,000. Excuse me. If we'd have carried on at the same rate this year, that would have been over £80,000 just to operate those lights. So we've cut down his usage by a quarter in order to hopefully still meet his needs, but equally we just have to be sensible in terms of the time that we use them. Brad was crying a little bit at Derby the other night when they had full pitch coverage of all the lamps and all the lights, and I think their electricity bill was £30,000 a month, I think something like that they were saying. Clearly that would just be beyond our reach. But yeah, disappointed naturally because investment's gone into something, but it's circumstance, not malpractice or anything from that ilk.
Next up. Anyone for any more in the room? Very quiet. Walk straight past you.
Clive, I know from your lair in South Africa, you look around the world for investment, and you found some from America, and we'll look forward to meeting these guys soon. I just wondered whether we at home in Lincoln, or we among the Lincoln fans, are we playing our part? Are there enough entrepreneurs coming from the core of the club, if you like, its home regions, to develop the club in the way you want?
Well, I think we've always reached out to local people. Obviously, we have a number on our board who've, put money into the club over the last couple of years. That has obviously not been enough, which is why, we've looked around the world to find other people, like-minded people, that would come on this journey with us. And, we've been really fortunate, firstly, to find Harvey and his family to join us. And I think we're really extremely fortunate to have found Brian, Pablo and Evan to come along on this journey with us as well. We're always open to more local investment. If there's anybody out there that wants to come on this journey with us, and again, for anybody here and any other fans, there is still always the opportunity, however small it is, to buy further shares in the club. We already have some 5,400 shareholders, and we'd always welcome more.
There's one over here, wasn't there?
Does the recent investment, or any investments, change the ambition of the club in terms of going forward?
I think we've always been ambitious, and that is why I think we've managed to get from National League into League One. I think we've recognised as the shareholder base, up until, let's say, about 18 months ago, could only take the club so far. And that's why we have continued to look for additional investment. And there's no doubt that the fact that Harvey and the WMA guys coming on board have given us the opportunity to continue to progress the club in a way that we wouldn't be able to do if it was just left to the shareholder base that was there previously. There's no doubt this gives us that extra impetus to try and move further.
Any more down this end while I'm here? No? Just a quick question from Sally. Why have the gold membership prices increased? You got all the good ones again.
Yeah, well, if I may take that slightly broader, so operating costs for the club next year we were just looking at some forecasts today, but have risen between 12 and 18% across pretty much all supply lines. Running our match days next year are going to be at least 15% more expensive. So across the board, I think I work with Clive and the rest of the directors to understand what we feel would be a fair and proportionate ask, but equally knowing that it is going to require an even bigger number of investment from the board and from the investors in order to effectively just run to the same business plan. So around a 4% increase we felt was fair and appropriate. We're obviously conscious and cognizant that everybody's struggling right now, so one of the things that we did do was extend those periods in terms of how long people have to pay. We've tried to create a method where people don't have to apply to external finance companies in order to spread those payments. And that's no small undertaking on our part. In fact, that's probably the biggest challenge that we do have, because just the cash flow modelling that we have at the club and how that works, the early bird intake is an incredibly important time and period for the club in terms of our planning. So what I'd like to think is that we have achieved the balance of, it's not fair for me to just turn around to the directors and investors and say, go on guys, you've got to fund the gap. But equally proportionately and appropriately, we have had to pass some of that on to the fans. Hopefully the other thing that we did is that we recognised that a policy that we've long had at the football club and we committed to around a single tier price policy, that probably had expired its use and wasn't fit for purpose in these times. And just as a reminder, our season ticket prices, or our ticketing prices across the stadium, ever since we've been back in the Football League, have been a single tier. So our cheapest ticket and our most expensive ticket is the single price. And the reason why we did that, quite candidly, is because if wherever you sit, but let's say middle of the upper GBM stand, we know people will have achieved that position through supporting the club over a long number of years, and that's their input. So to come up with a pricing strategy that in theory would charge more for those seats, we didn't feel it was appropriate. So that's why we kind of created the single tier price policy. What we recognise now, with the cost of living crisis and lots of asks, everything's going up, we felt that we could bring in another product, which is in the Real Mac stand, in order to give fans the opportunity to still attend on a seasonal basis, and even if it's a temporary switch, just move into that stand for a cheaper price, around £13 a game, which again, if you benchmark that across League One, I think we feel is fair and appropriate. So, yeah, did we want to put a price increase on? Absolutely not. Do we think we have struck a nice balance between passing that on to the fans, but proportionately as well playing our part? Hopefully we've done that. So yeah, not A1, I accept, but hopefully you feel we've struck the right balance.
Thank you, Liam. Any more in the room?
I'm struggling to understand how the FA can justify any kind of a return to standing on the terraces, whether it be rail seating, whatever. It's just beggars belief, in my opinion.
Why?
Like several people in this room, I lived through Hillsborough, and it's something that I never, ever want to see again. And I just think it's a backward step.
Yeah, I completely respect and understand that. I think in this country, and I grew up in Sheffield, and I knew people that were very, very closely affected by the Hillsborough disaster. I think it's really easy to look at single items or matters and say that is the reason for Hillsborough or any other matter. What I will say is, looking at the evidence, and some very smart academics and people have been looking at this for a number of years, crowd dynamics and movement in stadiums, we comfortably feel standing in stadia is safe. But what we do need to do is ensure that people get to enjoy their football, and this is a policy that we believe, how they would like to enjoy their sport. So having people standing in seated areas or vice versa, we accept that presents challenges. Just for clarity, at this moment in time, if we were to convert part of the Stacey West into the rail seats and those areas, the ratio is on a 1-to-1 basis at this moment in time. Candidly, we will be pushing the government authorities because we believe that we can, on a 1 to 1.3 ratio, have people standing safely in our stadium. But I think the bit that has advanced since the mid-80s and various disasters when they happen is, I'm not too sure if you know how much goes on into managing safety at stadiums, from the number of people that we have in control room, the safety officer. We have 360 cameras around the whole stadium. People are, bizarrely, we are monitoring and watching crowd dynamics. The biggest challenge actually we have in the stadium at the moment is, and we love the atmosphere it creates, but in upper 7, which is then migrating into upper 6 and then downwards to lower 7 in the GBM stand, we have people standing, persistent standing in seated areas. Now, there is no science to suggest this, so there's nothing to say that that is unsafe, but, as a layperson, I would quite simply think that having the appropriate barriers and the appropriate setup in that area is far safer than what we have at the moment. So I certainly respect your views, and it's good to hear your rationale and reason why, but just for clarity, there is no reason why you can't come to a football stadium and enjoy it seated, as all fans, in my opinion. As long as it's legal, they should have the choice of how they want to experience their football.
We've got 5 or 6 minutes of the second quarter to go. Get that? It's a joke. Well, not a joke, but... Any more down here?
We had a brief flirtation with the salary cap a couple of years ago, which arguably worked in our favour, and it made it a level playing field. What's the prospect of a return of the cap in any form, in your view? And do you think the fan-led review perhaps makes that more or less likely?
It's probably unlikely we'll have a hard salary cap, but any sort of redistribution from the Premier League will come with greater financial controls. The EFL is working on that at the moment. I'm part of the financial working party of the EFL that's looking at measures to be introduced. And although there won't be anything quite like the hard salary caps that we had, I think there certainly is opportunity there to have greater control over our costs, in particular player costs, and give us a better opportunity to punch above our weight and not incur the sort of losses that we're incurring at the moment.
Right, we've got one more question in this section, so make it a good one.
Evening, gents. Just one on the matchday programme. We heard earlier in the season that it was quite a, unviable kind of proposition, but I guess for some of us it's been staple of the matchday from kind of the day of joining and coming to the club. How's it looking for next season, and are we likely to have a printed product?
Yeah, so I definitely come from a traditionalist background. Growing up in Sheffield with my dad, going to watch the games, the matchday programme was a critical part of that. As I said, in Sheffield also was reading the green and after the game and watching on teletext for the scores to come in. And I think what we've got to understand is we have to modernise and we have to move with the times. And it's not necessarily about the programme as a match programme as an item in isolation. But what we do have to be mindful of is there is such a demand for media and content in all different ways across the fan base. And the match programme at this moment in time is serving around 200, 250 people a match day. So the time and effort that it takes to put into that, never mind the commercial model of it as a standalone product, but just the time and effort that it takes to put into that, one of the things that we've got to consider is how we could serve the fan base far better if that bandwidth, if that time was put into other forms of content, media. I think it's a bit early for me to say which direction that we will go. But yeah, it's a declining trend, and it's a frustrating one because I can completely understand why you and many others see it as an absolute cornerstone of the matchday ritual. Quite interestingly, the last fan survey we did, I think it was something like 35% of people said that they would religiously buy the matchday programme. But then when it comes to reality in terms of buying it, we're still down at those low 200s. I think we've done some consultation on content. and we've looked at other areas. But yeah, sadly, it is a dying art. As to the direction of travel we'll take, we're unsure. Candidly, you'll see the Gold Plus membership that's gone out. We've not included that as part of the package. That's not because we've made a decision. It's just that we, right now, you know, in February, we can't commit to doing it next year. So I think over the next 2-3 months, we'll further evaluate it, and we'll make sure we communicate what we're gonna do. But yeah, I can understand why there may be frustrations if that doesn't stay. It's finding a way.
Right, last one, and then we'll have a quick furniture change.
Well, supplementary to the last question, surely a lot of the content that goes online and goes into the various things, it's the production cost and somebody having the time and the effort to actually put it into a printed form. The content seems to be, that used to come out in the programmes, it seems to be less content comes out now than what used to happen a long time ago. Even though it's so much easier to have a website and do this and do that, and it's click of a button, it's the journalistic input and the writing of the articles and the research that goes into the background of it that makes a programme a good thing in the first place. It doesn't seem to be the same as it used to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, it comes back to that kind of virtuous circle, and equally, you know, how do you do that? How do you put your bandwidth and how do you put your time into creating new creative and content? But equally, that's going to be seen by 200 people versus if you can put exclusive content online or in other forms of media, and that's going to be seen by tens of thousands of people. And that, you know, I can't dress it up any other way. That is the simple, you know, considerations for how we do that. You're absolutely right to call us out because we have far and far less more exclusive content within the Matchday programme nowadays. And again, it comes down to how we manage our time. But yeah, I think it's how we achieve that balance. And I accept our decisions may not be for everyone, and I can understand why. There would be some disappointment, as I said, if the programme disappears. I think we've just got to find that balance. And you know, without jumping to conclusions, so don't please, you know, quote me on this, but does it end up becoming a monthly magazine? Is there other kind of productions that we can come up and look at that's a similar? You know, I think we've got to consider those models as well. But if you look outside of the Premier League and maybe the biggest clubs in the Championship, you'll see that we're all saying the same story, and we almost need a solution to that. So.
The third part of our evening tonight, and it gives me a very great pleasure to interview the three gentlemen to my, or your right, my left, from the WMA Sports Ventures Group. First and foremost, would you please give a big welcome to Mr. Pablo Webster. Next up, Mr. Evan Mitz. And last but not least, Mr. Brian Anderson. Right, so who's going to be first? You know, he's good. It's good, this shot. Can you come every time? You're really good. Just sit closer next time.
Why Lincoln City?
Who wants to take that? Me? I'll take it. You know, it's interesting. It's been a dream of mine, personally, and then collectively with these guys to invest in a club in Europe, somewhere outside of the United States. So we looked everywhere. We looked in South America, we looked in Eastern Europe, we looked in so many different places, but Lincoln was different. And a lot of it had to do with Clive, a lot of it had to do with Liam and the transparency and the honesty within the club. The city was fantastic. The opportunity was too good for us to really pass. And then getting to know more people around the city, getting to really feel the environment and the energy that's here, and I think there's an opportunity. So we've come in thinking that there's a great management team in place. We want to be supportive. I think from our perspective, just making sure that the club is stable in any way that we can help with the stability of the club, building infrastructure, that's why we're here. There's an opportunity. We want to go on this journey with all of these guys here, with you as fans. This is a dream come true for us.
Right, who's next? Or do you want to say something? Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I just will underline that it was really about the people. We were looking for a situation where we could genuinely partner with an existing investor group, an executive team, where we had a shared vision and we could go on a long-term project and really grow with the club. And that's actually pretty difficult to find, we found. And so we feel incredibly lucky to have found Lincoln City, and we're excited to be here.
Right, who's next? I'll come to you in a minute.
What does success look like? In 5 years or 10 years or whatever the time frame is?
I'll start. Success, short-term stability, being able to build infrastructure for the club. I think long-term success, I wouldn't be telling the truth if we weren't looking to push on at some point. What that looks like in terms of years, I can't say. I've got to rely on the experts we have who are doing a fantastic job. We want to support whatever the vision is for the club. We want to add value wherever we can add value, but we're ambitious about where we'd like to go, but I think we have to be measured and we got to be reasonable about what that looks like. So I would say success is short-term stability. Long-term, we'd certainly like to make a push, and I think we all know what direction that is. So besides any more details outside of that, I think stability is key.
That and a North versus South All-Star game, I think would be really good.
Well, just to say 1,000 welcomes. I'm in something called the Gold section of the Supporters Trust, and that's a group of 20 or 30 of us who are long-term fans, and I'm sure they'd all want me to welcome you. And our director, Mandy's here as well. You do know, guys, don't you, that you don't make any money out of being a director of an English football club. I think only Clive will correct me, but I think only 4 or 5 of the entire 92 make money anyway. That's the most famous of them all. And down at this level, it's there's no, as far as I understand it, there's no money to be made. You do understand that, don't you?
Oh, we didn't tell them that.
This changes everything.
Cat's out the bag.
Intimately aware of what we've walked into, and it's not about money.
Well, given what Andy just said, it's just as well, really, isn't it? Anyway, who's next? Any more for any more? Oh, you're over it. Oh, we've got a young person.
Could we see any American MLS players playing for Lincoln City in the future?
I would leave that question up to the director of football, but to be fair, there's no reason that we wouldn't look at as many options as humanly possible for looking for the best players. American players have gotten better. The level is rising where in the States, you never want to rule anything out as far as where you're looking for players, but that's certainly not a question for us, but I like where your head's at. With American folks coming over, it could be an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. It's difficult to make it work, and it's obviously not our decision, but that would be great. And in terms of having people in the United States watching Lincoln City play, that would be a big factor. Americans love to watch Americans playing abroad, so that would be incredible.
We would stand a greater chance of bringing an American to play for us if we were in the championship. Obviously, to get the qualification to get a work permit, you've obviously got to be of a certain standard. So it's mainly, I think, Championship Premier League clubs that have a greater chance of bringing American players over.
Who's next? Nick?
The nitty-gritty, of course, is money. Have you seen anything already that you can help us with? I mean, I think one of you three, if I read your details right, has worked with MasterCard. Is it one of you three? And sponsorship. I mean, sponsorship is a big thing here. To get money to put in our club. And do you see areas of sponsorship that can possibly help us? We've had Siemens here years ago and other people, but one of you guys had a big sponsorship deal with MasterCard. Is that one area you would look at to help our existing board?
You know, I think, you know, we're going to help out in terms of capital, and then the three of us and others in our group have experience in sports and the commercial side of it, and we're going to do everything we can to help the club, whether it's introductions to potential sponsors or introductions to consultants or third-party services that can help maximize commercial value for the club. Of course, we're gonna do everything we can to help.
Do you know a billionaire? The next level is absolutely bonkers. The championship. We've got, is it Preston or something like that? They lose 12 million a year. So just keep in that league. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, I think after the announcement today on the white paper, hopefully things will change over the next couple of years.
Who's next? You're back.
Just to say, you guys riding into town, it's set the rumour mill working. My hairdresser says, oh, they're only going to put in 40,000. But the chap who sits behind me at the games says that you're good for 40 million. And I just had to laugh at what the rumour mill can throw out. Would you like to give us any sort of a clue as to the level of your investment and whether it's perhaps phased over a period?
It's between those two numbers.
I can say that it's phased over time, and I think once we get to sort of the end of next year, we should be, you know, sort of like 15-20%. But yeah, we're phasing it over some time.
Young man down here. I'll warn you, we've got a Cornell question coming up in a minute.
Just on a light-hearted note, from my own personal experience, most English people don't know where Lincoln is. So how good is your geography?
Well, I've taken these guys uphill quite a few times, so we've been having a good time getting to know Lincoln City. So.
Did you know where it was on the map? Because most English people don't.
We do now, of course.
Right answer.
How many times have you been up the hill then? Because do you know, I think it's harder coming down the hill, personally.
Yeah, you might be right.
Oh, 100%. Cornell would like to know if he's going to be able to go and watch the Imps on a tour of the USA pre-season.
Yeah, look, from that point of view, I'm not too sure Mark could be over the moon with us, you know, taking flights over different time zones. In cattle class like Lincoln City, we'd have to do it. But look, listen, the joking aside, we have to explore all kinds of opportunities, this side and the other side of the pond. We've got to be sensitive that we play our trade in the English Football League, and the timing of the seasons are different, and there's all kinds of logistical issues. But I can understand why a tour of the States would be quite interesting and appealing. You know, Evan and the guys are involved with Carolina Core as well. We've got the relationship with San Diego Loyal. So, you know, who knows what may come in the future, but there isn't a tour to the US planned this summer for sure.
Oh, that's a shame, because I've got my bags packed. Right, who's next? He's back again.
I can't be here tonight, but what role does Landon Donovan play in the club? Because some fans see that name as a huge name, but maybe don't see the result of his involvement in the club. Can you explain that?
Landon was introduced to me by an intermediary. He was basically screening potential clubs for Harvey. So I had to get through Landon first before I could get to speak to Harvey. Obviously the Everton connection did help, and I did remind him of a couple of goals that he did score for Everton. And yes, I mean, Landon is a close friend of Harvey. Obviously, they're in constant contact. But as far as what Landon does with the club, he does have an investment into the club. And there is constant dialogue between Landon and Jazz George in particular. And really it's a case of leveraging off any connections he has, any expertise or anything, any knowledge that he has of US football. We've already been asked about potential players in the future, and again, that's where Landon could play a part.
Excellent. Who's next? Any more for any more? Got any questions, Matt? Got no questions. Any more for any more? No? Right, well, I just wanted to read this out. As I now live in the USA, this is a guy called Mick. As I now live in the USA, I will leave the questions to others, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to say in my 60 years of being a Lincoln City fan, I've never been more proud of the club, the direction it's going in, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. To the board and investors, thank you for being custodians of our great club. Look after her, and she will bring you many years of pride and joy. That's from Mick, who's stateside. Right, last chance. We've got no more questions for the guys? No? Is that it? Well, in that case, guy. Oh, yeah, there is one down here. I nearly got you out of it.
Obviously, the women's game over in the US is very popular. Will you have any input in the recent Lincoln City women's side?
So, I agree 100%. The three of us are involved in different ways with professional soccer, women's soccer in the United States. I'm very interested in the team at Lincoln City. I know the three of us are, so I've been following the results and following them on Twitter, and I'm looking forward to learning more and more about the program.
Is that it? All good? Right, in that case, so fellas, first of all, on behalf of everybody in the room, big thanks for coming over, big thanks for getting involved in our football club. I'm sure some of you will get the chance to meet the guys later. But for now, give it up for Pablo, Brian, and Evan.
You've signed another youth team player to the professional squad recently, Michael John Kamsa-Kamara, who frankly, I'll be honest with you, I hadn't heard of, but clearly you rate him. What it is about players that actually makes them stand out, to you and as prospects for the future for the club?
Yeah, thanks for the question. MJ, as he's known to everybody, has just attacked his scholarship really well. We signed him from a private academy in London. He hasn't had a background of being in a professional club previously. I think sometimes that journey can be advantageous for a player. I think he really appreciates the opportunity, and everything has been a big challenge for him from the minute he walked through the door. He handled everything well, even in pre-season. We went and played some non-league clubs, so at 16 years old, playing against men. So everything's been put in front of him. He's risen to that challenge. But if you want like the attributes that we see in him, real good physicality, good size, pace, strength, good athleticism, but most of all, a really elite mindset. He attacks every day and gets the most out of himself in every single training session. So we look at his profile and think that he's got the tools, if you like, that can be developed to play in our first team in the future. There's a long job between now and then, but with the mindset he has, it gives him every chance. So that's why the club's invested showed some faith in him. And it's really important, I think, with our young players that at 17 years old, it's the first opportunity we get to put them on a professional contract. The maximum term we can do that for is 3 years by the rules. So that just gives us a little bit more time to develop them. It's very, very difficult, Mark will explain, for a young man to come into League One at 17, 18 years old. So having that little bit of time beyond the scholarship is important. And obviously we want to protect the club in terms of potential compensation and making sure that the player stays with us. And if someone else wants to take him, we're well compensated for that. So yeah, they're the reasons really. The physicality, the tools he has, but the elite mindset really makes him stand out.
Thanks, Jez. Did I have one down here? Young lady.
Hi, mine's about Charlie Kendall. Where do you see his pathway with the club? Because obviously he came in, went out on loan, didn't really play. He seems to be doing extremely well at Bromley. Do you see him fitting in for next season?
To me? We discussed this today, actually. I think for Charlie's development, I personally think he needs to go back out on loan next year. I think he's had a tough loan at Sutton, but I think it was a really, really good loan because there's so much learning. Learning doesn't just come totally from success. I don't want to use the word failure, but struggling has been really, really good for him. Charlie's an outstanding finisher, will score a lot of goals, but there's so much more about football than just scoring goals. And the bits in between about staying on the pitch, link-up play, pressing, triggers, multiple things to be a good player. Finishing is the end part of it. Game understanding is really, really big. So for me, I know Charlie scored a couple of weeks ago. He's highly regarded by myself and the club. But for his development going forward, I would personally like to see him do really well this year in the National League and either go back to the National League or hopefully step up again into League Two. The gap between the National League and League Two and League One's massive. And I think what Ben House has done this year is really, really unique. It's huge credit to himself. But I think it's important we don't miss out on Charlie's development as well. It's really important that we don't fast track him too early and make sure he's ready for that jump.
Fair enough. Next question. Oh, he's back again. I'll go to Nick first and then I'll come to you. You're going to get a free pass to every one of these.
One for each of you. Jez, well done for getting Ethan. And how long were you chasing him for? And one for Mark. Do we stand any chance of keeping Regan Poole, who seems to be quite happy with how things are progressing at the moment?
I'm going to help Mark out here and let him do Ethan and I'll do Regan. Then he'll get applause and I'll get booed. Look, our job is to be aware of good players, but there's a lot more to signing players than being aware of good players because good players are hard to get and there's usually a lot of competition. So we're aware of Ethan when he made his debut as a left back years ago, but our interest was particularly focused, if you like, on him when we've seen his progress in the last 4 or 5 months, so most of this season. It was, I think, pretty widely reported in the press, and it wasn't far off the mark that Forest Green Rovers tried to sign him, made an offer, had an offer accepted for a lot more money than we paid for him during December. So we actually went up to watch him a couple of times in December. I went just before Christmas. But at that moment, being honest, I thought it was probably a wasted trip. Never a wasted trip because you always see something if you watch a game, but we thought that maybe that deal would get done. Because we had the relationship with the agent and because we've been speaking to them for some time about Ethan, when an opportunity arose at the back end of the window, Ethan hadn't chosen to go at Forest Green. He wanted to go to a club that he felt could give him a platform to progress in his career. It wasn't about money. If it was about money, he would definitely have signed for Forest Green. So then we had a small window of opportunity, and sometimes that's what it is in football, that you know about good players, but then there's a moment of opportunity, and we were fantastically backed by the board, by Clive, by the board members, and because there was a significant fee to pay, and a fee probably bigger than we would normally pay as a football club, but that was still significantly less than the fee that was on the table for Forest Green, and it was what we believe was under market value for the player, and then it was just trying to get the deal done in the last 3 or 4 days of the transfer window. So yeah, it was a good one for us because we think he's a really good player that comes in and improves our 11 straight away. We couldn't have done it without the backing of the football club being able to pay that level of transfer fee, so we're really grateful to them as well.
With regards to Regan, I think the reality is it's going to be incredibly difficult to keep him. He's a fantastic relationship with everybody connected at the club, not just myself. I've got really good relationships with all the players, but particularly with Regan. And again, I think he deserves his chance to play in the Championship. I think he's good enough to take that chance. I think he sees that, he knows that. So I don't think it's not that he doesn't want to stay with Lincoln or he's not happy here. I think he's incredibly happy here. But the opportunity to go to play in the Championship when the average career is 8 years, I would imagine he'd at least treble his salary. There's big money in the Championship. You know, I have one particular club pestering me about him, and that's just one that I know of. So I think he'll have too many options, and it wouldn't matter what the club offered him financially. My own opinion is that he will want to test himself at the highest level he could play at. So I think, hand on heart, the reality is I think Regan will probably end up in a Championship club next year. That's how I see it. He knows we want to keep him. He knows my thoughts on him. He knows how much I care about him and think of him as a player and as a person. He knows what the club think of him. We haven't wasted any time in trying to keep him, but I think the reality is, if I'm being honest, and he's not told me this, is that he'll want to take his opportunity in the Championship.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, we're in dialogue with his agent regularly, but it's exactly that. He's over 24 years old. He becomes a free agent in the summer. He knows he'll have a Championship club come in if he's out of contract and free to leave, and that's a massive opportunity for him at a point in his career that it will be financially impossible for us to do something that will prevent that. And we've explored that in full with his agent, not just in the last 2 or 3 months, but in the last 18 months. And even if there was a financial way of doing it, he wants to have the opportunity to play in the Championship. And all I would say is, we signed Regan from a club in League One when he wasn't particularly happy at that club, and again, an opportunity came to sign a really, really good player. The club could have actually sold him that following summer, and the board, again, got really big backing to not accept an offer from a club that came in League One. So we've enjoyed 2 more years of Regan, but it was going to always be very, very difficult once we didn't win that playoff game and we didn't go up ourselves to keep him beyond the end of his contract.
Man with a hat.
It's a question to Mark. Apparently, 21 years ago today, you scored a very good goal for Wolves against Stockport. As per a Twitter clip, and the question is, from your progression from a player to a coach, in this group of players, can you see any significant players moving on to great coaching careers, as I'm sure you will come to have?
Do you know, that's a brilliant question. Really, really good question. Really difficult question. I think, and the reason why I think a lot of people just focus on their careers and heavily tunnel visioned in what they do, and I think a lot of coaches fall into it. And I think I look at Pawdy. I think Pawdy'd be somebody I'd have an eye on in that, but
Yeah,
a really difficult question to answer, actually.
I was going to say Matty Virtue, potentially. Just a quiet leader, knowledge of the game, bit of a thinker about the game. Just seems to me like somebody who might want to stay in football beyond playing. And I think I'm getting into territory that isn't mine here, but I think he looks like a bit of a manager on the pitch at times. I think he's got real good knowledge of the game and passes that on in a quiet, unassuming way to players around him. So, but you can never tell, because maybe you should ask the question of Mark whether 21 years ago he thought he would.
No, I didn't at all. And as I said, it was something that I was playing for Wolves then. It was something that a future Wolves manager said to me, which made me think of it. So, and with modern life, some people don't like the pressure, some people don't want the publicity, some people crave it. I think because we're so young, these guys have got so much going on in their lives and so much ahead of them. I can't imagine for 1 minute. Maybe Matty's slightly older. Brilliant question, very difficult to answer. Apologies.
You got another one? He's got another one.
You're on fire, you're on.
Genuinely, because I do see some players do their coaching badges towards the end of their career. Is that something you thought about before you looked to retire? Is it something that goes through your mind as a player? Or sometimes is that completely ignored?
No, I completely ignored it. I got absolutely badgered into it by a gentleman called Kevin Cooper, who is coaching for Cardiff out in Malaysia now. And in the middle of my B licence, I actually nearly walked out of the room because I thought, this is just not for me. And just out of respect to the fellow candidates and Kevin in particular, I stayed there, and here I am now. So I'm really grateful to Kevin for that. My one advice to players is to do it now, because you've got so much time in your hands, and not end up chasing your tail. And if I was a player now, I'd get my B licence, my A licence, and I'd get my pro licence as quick as I could. It's a bit like driving a car. Once you pass your test, you've got your licence, you don't have to buy a car. So my advice would be to do it now, straight away.
Andy?
Just like to ask Mark about Lewis Montsma. He was looking great when he came back, and I'd like to hear you talk about it, please.
Yeah, he's got very sharp elbows. Yeah, no, it's a shame actually, because he's a lovely, lovely man. He's a real gentleman. He's a gentle giant. He's been outstanding in training. His physical shape is phenomenal. I was really shocked at how good he came back. I really didn't expect him to hit the level he's hit so quickly. We sat down with him after about 2 weeks and went through some analysis with him, that just to kind of evidence that you can't just come back and walk into the team, and there's some things we need to touch up on, brush up on. We made it clear to him that he'd have to earn the right to get in the team. But I think since he's got back in the team, the games he's played, he's looked... You know, the game against Accrington and Bristol and Derby, a huge part of that is his ability to control the game with his pass and his composure on the ball, and he calms those around him. And I thought he had a really positive effect on the players around him in terms of the style of play. And just with himself and Ethan, they've made a huge difference in terms of their style. I'm gutted he's missing for the games. But I think it will be good for him, because normally what happens is after such a long period out, you come in, you're bouncing on adrenaline, you take off and you dip. And I think the couple of games that he will miss will enable him just to come back down a peg and really carry on. So, but yeah, we've got a real talent on our hands there.
Mark, do you see Freddie Draper becoming part of a Lincoln City team in the future?
He's somebody we care about a lot, and somebody we think's got some great attributes. Hence why we've invested in him, and he's got years left on his contract. I think there's things we need to improve on with Freddie, with his mobility and his pace. But I think when I look at all the players that we've got, the young lads, he's certainly got the physical attributes to have a career, certainly in League One. The reason why I'm hesitant to answer your question, I think there's just so much more development to come from players, and hence why I talk about Charlie going out and not missing that development. With MJ, it's so important we don't fast track players into the first team and then miss out on key years in the development. But I do think Freddie's got good attributes, and he's one of the players that I would look at and be hopeful that he can have a career in senior football for sure.
Any more for any more? No? Oh, over here. I'll come to you next.
Just going back to the issue of sort of Matty Virtue being a quiet, composed leader who influences and Montsma, but now we've got Ethan how do you say it? Errahan. Does that make... how many more people of that do we need? And if we had the opportunity, say when Matty Virtue becomes available again, would they be a good combination, or would they be sort of trying to do the same thing?
I think the bottom line is good players are good players, so lots of you don't need a captain's armband to be a leader, and lots of people lead in different ways. The best captains I've ever played with were the quietest people, so ultimately what we want is good players at the club, whether they talk, lead, however they do it. A good player is a good player. So what we try to do is profile the players to fit around what we're looking for and maximise the system we want to play in, which is heavily dictated by the league, I believe. But ultimately, we're just after good players. And if they're leaders, even better. Like I said, you don't need a captain's armband to be a leader.
So we're having 3 on the pitch together towards the end of the season, and have all 3 together towards the end of the season on the field.
Sorted. I love the way he looked at you, Jess.
He's the boss.
Who's next? Any at the back? No? He's back again.
So if the online stats are to be believed, that a handful of players are out of contract at the end of this coming summer, is that, to piggyback on his question, an effort to try and rebuild a squad for Mark, or is there any ambition to try and keep on some of the key players in this squad for longer contracts?
Yeah, so I think contract management is something that you're constantly battling with. How much do you want to change, and how many do you want to allow to be out of contract at any one time? How much do you leave yourself to do in a transfer window? We've been discussing in the last few days a lot, and a lot with the guys over there as well, the number of loans we have and our reliance on loans. We have to eventually wean ourselves off that. You know, we had almost the ultimate success with that 2 or 3 years ago. But it's getting harder and harder to sign that A-star loan, if you like. Premier League clubs are less open to letting them out. More go into the Championship as a first loan because the Championship clubs probably have got less finance than they had 3, 4, 5 years ago. And even clubs in our league that would never have dreamt of taking loan players because they would believe they were too big to do that are now in the same market. So it becomes a really tough market. So look, there's some individual conversations going on with certain players in the squad and their representatives, of course, and that's our job, and we keep that private because it's right for them that we would do that. But equally, we were really pleased to sign Ethan in January because that's one less thing to do in the summer, and you can't leave yourself too many to do in any transfer window. There's got to try and be some consistency, if you like, from transfer window to transfer window if you want to build a squad. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but we want to keep the key players. We have to put our hands up with Regan, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. With 1 or 2 of the other players that are out of contract, we are in discussions with. But I think it's a healthy number of players that are out of contract, actually, at the end of the season, because it gives us... We have got a good base going into next season, but we've also got the scope to make changes and definitely to reflect a different system and a different formation and different nuance from last season.
Do you have to have a special discussion with players that have got a red card?
Good question. I think it always depends on why. So, for example, I think Adam's red card was really harsh. I think something, when I look at Ben House, I think he does so much for us from a counter-pressing perspective. I think he leaves himself open, but I wouldn't change that in any way. Lewis's red card is not an acceptable action by anybody. I didn't speak to Lewis about it because I can't explain to you how devastated he was about it. So me reprimanding him or having a go at him or speaking to him like a child, he recognises his mistake, he understands it, and ultimately it cost him dearly in the end. So personally, I'm not sure whether you agree with me, and I absolutely respect decisions. I haven't spoke to anybody this year about the red cards. I don't think we're a dirty team. I think we're a very, very fair team, very honest team. And I think 2 of our red cards this year have been completely undeserved, but always respectful. I didn't think Ben's first yellow was a yellow. I thought the second one was, but I'd never take that away from him. I think he's an outstanding counter and pressing player for us. So no, I don't.
It's regarding the relationship with Johida in Ireland. How did that establish, and how powerful can that be going forward, considering how great 2 of the last loans have been to there?
Yeah, as often happens in football, despite this being such a multi-million-pound business, happens with relationships. So when we spotted Sean Rowan, 15 years old, he's playing for a little grassroots Sunday League team called Phoenix, and the guy coaching the team was a guy called Dara Doyle, who's now assistant manager of Drogheda. So when we were looking to try and find, look, the biggest advantage for us with the Irish League is for players whose early part of the season is disrupted by injury, because it's a summer league, so they don't stop at the end of April. So Sean last season had loads of injuries in the first half of the year. We were really keen for him to try and go and get a block of 20 games to come into pre-season. We instigated that, spoke to Dara, asked if he had an interest. They were very, very keen. Sean and Sam went over there and did very, very well. Now, what that does effectively is that paves the way for future opportunities, because they did so well. They represented themselves and the club. Honestly, Liam and I went to watch their last but one game. They played Shamrock Rovers, who won the league. They won 1-0. And you couldn't believe the genuine affection and respect from the people of the club, the supporters. Everybody couldn't speak highly enough of the boys. Not just how they performed on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. So they just become a little bit of a trailblazer, and then obviously there's interest from that club. Have you got any others? Freddie he's had a pretty tough, in terms of your question, he's had a pretty tough 12 months, Fred. He burst on the scene, he's 17 years old, he comes on, he plays a few games last year in the first team, got concussed almost scoring, if you remember here, a really, really brave header. Had another concussion after that, had a problem with his knee, nursed a shoulder injury, got him through to the end of the season, then he had an op on his shoulder. So it's been pretty fragmented. Elisha tore his ankle ligaments in the first pre-season game against Leeds under 18s. So for those two boys with not much football, it was a fantastic opportunity to go and do the same, hopefully get 20 games. They're a real underdog, Drogheda. They're the only part-time team apart from UCD in the league. They've got the lowest budget. It'll be tough, but that's good for them. That's what we want. And hopefully both of them come back with a nice bank of games ready for pre-season next season.
So for Mark, what's your target for the end of the season? And do you talk to your squad about where we want to end up? Obviously we want to be safe, but do you ever talk about positions or what's achievable, anything like that?
No, I haven't, to be honest. I don't ever looking past the next game, but I do firmly believe when I look at the table, I've got 2 games in hand on 2 teams above us, same points, 3 games in hand on team 3 above us, 1 point. So I do feel that we should be looking up, and we are looking up with a mindset of finishing as high as we can. And I've always said when I came in, what I want to do is progress on the great work that's been done by the guys before me, and I think we're doing that. And like I said, when I look at the table now and the games we've got in hand, and the MK Dons at home, Cheltenham away, Broughton are our spare games, I think the games that when we play anybody, we really feel like we can beat anybody. It doesn't always happen like that. But I really feel that we're 100% looking up at the minute, and not cliches. We want to finish as high as possible, but I actually do really feel and firmly believe that we will finish in a really, really respectable position this year.